What's your "that could have been me" story? I was in the service. In Afghanistan during a deployment. I was injured and they had to call a medevac to get me out. I had always been in the lead vehicle with my team chief. But after I was injured our team was one person light, so they switched him out of the lead vehicle and gave the position to a full team. That team hit an IED less than 24 hours later. Killing the driver would have been me, and the TC would have been him. I never complained about my injuries again. My friend's mom cancelled a double date in California in the 70s because she was sick. The other couple went on the picnic like they planned and both got murdered by the Zodiac killer. Chances are he wouldn't have attacked all four of them since that's a bigger group. But sucks for the other couple. In 2011, the beginning of my junior year in high school, I had surgery to fix a hole I tore in my shoulder muscle. I had it the Monday before the national championship air races, on a Saturday, in Reno, Nevada, and I live decently close. We'd go every year and rent tickets to the box seats. Parents decided I couldn't go because my meds were too powerful, double dose of Percocet plus a pill to make me not throw it all up, and I was in a brace and if I got bumped I could have really fucked myself up. So I stayed home. That night on the news we discovered that one of the racers had lost control and crashed into the box seats, killing I don't know how many people. If I would have gone, there's no way a doped up teenager with one working arm would have survived. I was at a stoplight in the left lane about to turn onto the highway. Nickelback came on the radio, so I looked down to change the station to something less like nails on a chalkboard. I missed the lights change to green. The guy next to me didn't. He drove forward and was immediately T-boned by a truck running a red light on the access road going 70. TLDR. Nickelback saved my life. Not me, but my uncle, who is an electrician, was working on the top floors of the World Trade Center. My uncle is someone who will never call in sick. On 9/11 my grandma convinced him he should stay home because he had a bad cold. Good job, grandma. Went to Taco Bell with mom and friend. They both got a drink and I said I would just share with them. Even after being offered that mom would buy me one, no problem. Next guy in line got a drink. He won a 40,000 Land Rover off the cup contest. Once in first grade, I let a kid cut me in line and he got the lucky tray. The ice cream he won should have been mine. My ex, several years ago, pulled a fake pregnancy scare on me. She was on birth control and claimed that the antibiotics she was on caused it to not work. We were using condoms. She said she was pregnant because she skipped her period. We're going to be parents, so we should stop using condoms. I asked her to take a test, and she went nuclear. Accused me of calling her a liar, and more. I ended it. She wasn't pregnant, but sure as hell wanted to be. I found out from a mutual friend that she had quit the birth control. She lied to the next dude she slept with, got knocked up, and there was a shotgun wedding of sorts. They're miserable from what I last heard. I'm still child free. Make good money. DJ on the weekends. Ride motorcycles. And will soon be getting a vasectomy to keep it that way. Early 2001. Sophomore in college. Was sitting with my dorm buddy. Discussing technology trends. At the time, the most advanced cell phone was barely able to access WAP-based sites. I was lamenting the need for me to carry around my PDA, my cell phone, my MP3 player, and my camera, as it took up a lot of pocket space. We started sketching out ideas on how to integrate different technologies into one device. After realizing that there was a lot of hardware technologies that could be emulated through software functions, the design cleared up. Initially there was the cell phone side, and then the back had MP3 player buttons, and it slid open to reveal the keyboard. Eventually we started eliminating buttons, repurposing them based on software controls. Then, looking at some of the functions of the early Windows CE devices trying to make it to market, we ditched a lot of the physical buttons in favor of an on-screen button. Our design still incorporated using a stylus. Actual touchscreen technology was still pretty new, but it was very similar in simplicity to the original iPhone. Granted, I was working off a design background, and him off of computer science, so there was limited ability to actually do more than just sketches. If we had access to the right group of people to talk to, or had put some of our ideas down into a patent. Oh, the possibilities. I'm going to go cry into my beer now. Not me, but my father. My father was in the military. One day before going on a convoy he was late to chow, lunch, and was forced to wait with the next squad to get food. So since he had to wait, someone else was told to take his seat in the back of the truck so they could get going. Now to the point of the story. The truck ended up crashing and the guy who was sitting where my father was supposed to be got impaled by a piece of pipe and died right then and there. Mine happens quite frequently. I am a social worker who helps people get their shit together. Get off drugs. Get into housing. Get jobs and get off welfare. When I was in my late teens early 20s I used a lot of illicit substances. And was really headed nowhere. I found myself knocked up and had an epiphany. I terminated the pregnancy. Stopped the partying. Went to college and ended up getting my master's in counseling. I can't even count how many times I've found myself sitting across from an old friend or classmate trying to help them figure their lives out. Every single time I think to myself that could have very easily been me. Double quote. I got hit by a car while I was riding my bicycle. I went through a crosswalk and some bitch hit me. When I was being questioned by the police, I got a stern talking to about the importance of walking my bike across the crosswalk. The thing is, had I walked my bike across at the same speed I rode it across, I would have either taken a direct blow and been pinned by the car and my bike, or I would have taken an indirect blow and would have been pinned under my bike. In both cases, I would have at least walked away with shattered ribs, or more likely, would have been dead. The fact riding my bike across saved my life didn't save me from the tongue lashing I got from my mom. I could have either been dead or survived with a minor sprain. Like I did. Seems like riding my bike across was the better option. TLDR. Being irresponsible saved my life. This isn't as serious as some of the other posts, but it scared me for a little bit afterwards. I woke up early one morning and decided to stop at Caribou Coffee before going to work around 8:30 am or so. This Caribou Coffee is located in a strip mall right near a Trader Joe's. As I am walking out of the door of Caribou Coffee with my fresh coffee in hand, I am about a foot away from a 16-17-year-old kid. He looks at me in the eye with a nervous sort of look and I smile and walk on my way. I didn't even think anything about the encounter really. Until on my way to my car I hear a woman screaming in the parking lot. The same kid I just passed was robbing a pregnant woman walking on her way into Trader Joe's. The kid stole the pregnant woman's wallet and darted off. She was not hurt or anything, just shaken up. But it really freaked me out for the rest of the day. I really did not think while passing this kid he was sizing me up to rob outside of Caribou Coffee, but I could have easily been his victim that morning. I am a tiny 21-year-old girl who looks even younger. He could have easily overpowered me but chose the pregnant woman instead. It was really sad to see. I felt pretty guilty for not being able to help her, but some workers in Trader Joe's ran after the kid as soon as he darted. Not sure if he was caught or not. Freshman year of high school I got a bad concussion which later led me down a serious depression and anxiety attacks. I was one strong flex of my index finger away from killing myself. I later found out I suffered a serious head injury and went through rehabilitation and therapy. I still get shitty headaches every now and then, but except for that I'm as good as 100%. Junior year comes and a well-known senior at my school hangs himself. Knowing his personality and his easygoing approach to everything, no one knew he was suffering so much. I still look back at that day and think I could have ended up like him. Just a dead body leaving nothing but unsolved questions. I was at an Atlas Sound show, Bradford from Deer Hunter, and his equipment got lost during his flight, so he had to play an acoustic set. He asked if anyone in the audience knew how to play drums. Now, I've listened to his records non-stop for years and know all his songs back and forth. I've also been playing drums for 10 plus years. I was front row center and could have easily gotten his attention, but I froze up and some other dude got called on. The guy that ended up playing sucked really bad. I even tried liking it. After one song he said thanks. That's all. I keep replaying it in my head where I take the initiative and go up there to play with him. And then he asks me to tour with him and we become best friends. I live in Minneapolis, and once a while back while my mom and I were getting a gift for my auntie, we had to take the I-35W Street Anthony Falls Bridge to the store, but the highway had traffic so my mom took the streets. That night the bridge collapsed, killing 13 people and injuring 145 right at the time we would have been on it. I'm not that into religion, but I thank Jesus every day for that. Not my story, but my dad's. For a few weeks, my dad was having a recurring nightmare. In it, he would be driving his 1989 Nissan pickup through an intersection where a yellow Corvette would run the light in a perpendicular angle, T-boning my dad and killing him. It wouldn't happen every night, but it happened often. Then he has to go out of town for work. After finishing what he was sent to do, he's driving home kinda tired, but hopped up on coffee for the drive. He's sitting at a red light daydreaming for a moment when the light turns green, catching him off guard. He takes his foot off the brake, puts the clutch in, and gets ready to enter the intersection when a yellow Corvette blasts through on the intersecting road, running a red light. Had my dad been waiting on the light rather than daydreaming, he would have been T-boned on the driver's side, just like his dream. Afterward, the nightmare stopped. Coming late to the party. I'm crazy good at this one. You'll remember the bombing shooting in Norway a couple of years ago. I woke up that morning and decided to get the earlier bus to Gothenburg and walked by the bomb about 3 hours before it went off. My original bus was 3 hours later. I was in the mall in Kenya a few weeks before the shooting. This summer I collapsed at the summit of Kilimanjaro, got hit by a car in Nairobi, and had a tree fall on my bed while I was up peeing, all within 2 weeks. When I was in the 7th grade I told one of my 3 best friends that I was going to ask a girl out who I rejected a year before. This girl is someone nobody in my social group ever showed any interest in. I told them I was doing it that night when I would be over her house to study. All of them said good for you. Go for it. That same night I go over to study and pop the question and she says she would want to, but one of my best friends pulled some sociopathic shit and asked her out immediately after school. So that sketchy bastard and her go out for the next 2-3 years. All the while he is never hanging out with any of his friends. And whenever they would socialize they would show up together and make out. The kid became a total loser and nobody truly enjoyed being around them for the next 3 years. To add to it all, the girl cheated on him and became a total slut. California guy here from the Bay Area. I have to drive 4 hours to Tahoe just to see snow. On this particular trip, the rain from the California border turned into a snowstorm. I rode up with 3 carloads of friends. I'm experienced driving in the snow, so I braced myself. As we were getting closer to the resort, the snow lightened up and the traffic almost disappeared. I was driving in the very front at no more than 40 miles per hour, when we slipped on black ice right on the apex of a winding turn. We spun out, and the snowboards actually went flying out the front and back windows, shattering them. The car in our last group was fortunate enough to stop before any damage was done, but a car in the inside lane slipped and drove into our lane and rammed into a snowbank. The driver and passenger's head shattered the windshield, and I remember them walking outside with their kids. They all looked to be in bad shape, but alive and shaken. Anyways, it was crazy. And as I write this story I'm actually about to drive up in a couple hours. If you read this, I love you. Kisses. Was on my motorcycle, following behind a sedan. As we entered the intersection I had a bad vibe and pulled on my brake slightly. It slowed me down just slightly, but it was enough to watch the car in front of me explode as it was hit by a Mustang that blew through a red. Both cars pirouetted together for a moment before the Mustang continued spinning through the intersection. It eventually came to a stop by rear-ending a little Honda. This was all as I went from slowing down to doing everything to keep from getting tangled up in their wreck. I pulled over and became the first responder on the scene, walking around and checking on everyone. There was glass, debris, and various fluids everywhere. The driver of the car that had been in front of me was unconscious. The driver of the Mustang was disoriented and cussing about how someone hit him, and his passenger was crying. Then I spotted the first car the Mustang driver hit, prior to the car in front of me, which was this older Toyota driven by a little old lady, and she was pissed. Maybe 1 second faster and I'd been teed by the Mustang, and probably not survived that hit, considering how fast he was traveling. Other drivers at the intersection came up and started telling me how lucky I was, and how they'd initially thought I'd been hit. I stuck around to give a detailed statement of events to the police before continuing the 1 block home. There is this one guy who is about my age, but the next common relative we have is, I believe, our great-grandfather. I have only seen him once when he visited us a couple of years ago. He was accompanied by his grandmother, who is the sister of my grandfather. This woman is very religious to the point where she tried to convert everyone in the family, and also passed it to most of her children. Being raised with no particular religion myself, that was the reason my parents didn't have any contact, except for said one time. When I say them. So there we sat, drinking coffee, eating cake, smell talking and avoiding all potentially dangerous topics. The boy seemed nice and I knew looked for perils or something familiar. When the old lady starts to ask about my hobby, I mentioned the PC as casually as possible, but she immediately jumped on it and started telling me about one of her daughters who went overseas and married a man who made video games in America. To this day I regret asking her the name of that man, for I know had I grew up closer to her I may have followed this man and his dream career. She replied with Sid Meier. Double quote. Going to get buried. But back when I was like 13 or so, I was just starting to be allowed to sit in the cool seat, passenger front in mom's minivan. We often went to my grandmother's Friday Saturday so my mom could work nights, and went home Saturday afternoon or so. Occasionally I would get to stay over Saturday Sunday too, and I'd stay up late and watch Monty Python with my grandma. Anyways, one Saturday I make a bit of a fuss about wanting to stay over, and my mom relents and lets me stay. Turns out, on the way home that day, they got T-boned by a teenager in a Jeep who tried to blow through a red light while my mom was making a left. Everyone was fine, but the one section of the car that took the brunt of the impact was the front passenger seat. That entire corner of the car was just fucking gone. During the summer of 2012 I was in my kitchen with 2 friends. One of my friends had a helium balloon that he took from a party earlier that day and he decided to release it off my back porch. He poked his head back into my house and told me there were people in my backyard behind my fence. I told him forget about it and come inside. Then my other friend tried to lock him outside but was not quick enough. We found out later that the people he saw had just stabbed a cab driver and ran the cab into the woods. I don't know what would have happened if the 2 men saw my friends, but I don't think it would have been good. I was 20 years old living with 3 other guys in a rented house. We had this one female friend who was very slutty. Anytime she was over partying, she would end up fucking one of us. One night, myself and one of my roommates double teamed her. No condoms. A few weeks later she gets us together and says that she is pregnant. And it's 100% one of us. We were OBV very WTF. And we both paid to get DNA test done. My roommate ended up as a father. This was 10 years ago. He pays $600 monthly support and has 0 relationship with his son. Me and my friends were going through a free running phase where we were just trying it out and seeing what we could do. At school one day we were coming down some stairs at lunch and I jumped up and grabbed a ledge of the level above and hung there for a few seconds and then jumped down. My friend did the same thing but instead his hand slipped and he landed head first on the concrete below. He then had a seizure in my arms, airlifted to hospital and had a massive blood clot, and for months couldn't walk or talk, and to this day 6 years later is still having speech therapy. Yeah, a huge that could have been me moment. There was a big concert in my tiny little hometown the weekend of my 19th birthday. I took my best friend, and we were hanging out, doing the whole small town concert scene thing. And this guy we both knew from high school, not well, came up and started cuddling up to her and telling her to come back to his place after the show. Blah blah. Grinding on her and everything. He says there is an after party and we should definitely be there. I felt weird about it and refused to go, to my friend's intense displeasure. About a month later we find out he took 2 other girls from our high school back to his place after that concert and brutally raped and beat both of them after slipping roofies in their drinks. Could have been me. Glad I trusted my intuition, common sense. When I was 7 I met this person who was 3 years older than me at a school fair, and became friends very quickly. At the end of the day he invited me to come to play some football soccer by his house the next day. I accepted. But the next day I felt ill, and my parents went to his house to say I wouldn't be coming. This happened on the Saturday and Sunday. I then went to school on Monday and in the morning had the normal weekly assembly. The first piece of the news we heard from this assembly was this person had been run over trying to recover a ball on the road from a drunk driver and later died in hospital. I could have been there either as another victim, or been scarred for life seeing someone die. Flight 587 lost both its engines and crashed into the Rockaway Peninsula on the 12th of November, 2001. All passengers and crew died on impact, as well as many people on the ground who were in their homes at the time of the crash. The co-pilot was flying the plane when he encountered turbulence, speculated to be from a bird flying into the engine, and overcompensated with the controls, leading to both engines and wings ripping off of the plane. The pilot took over the controls at some point before this happened, and took the plane into a nosedive. If the pilot hadn't done this, or if the pilot had done this a second later than he had, that plane would have crashed on my head, as well as my mother and sister. We were making biscuits in the oven, and watching them rise, right before our very eyes. I remember that we were singing that song. Close bracket. So my eternal gratitude goes out to that pilot who selflessly took the plane down into a nosedive, instead of allowing it to plow through several blocks of suburban housing. I was driving on a dark, winding road with a car full of friends one night. A car came up behind us and started to tailgate me. After slowing and searching for a turnout we finally found one down the road a little and I pulled over. The car behind me accelerated violently past and proceeded to run into a log in the middle of the road not 100 feet from where I stopped. The front of her car was destroyed, and the airbags had been deployed. My friends and I helped the drunken Coast Guard woman push her car to the side of the road and I gave her a ride back to the base. Weird night. She called me the next day and told me her car was totaled and thanked me for the ride. My husband and I ended up at murder scenes in NH. We had gone to the gun store a few towns over. Husband was a police officer and also a gun dealer. On the way back, we actually went looking for an antique store and got lost for about 20 minutes before we ended up at the Eager in Colebrook. There were 2 cruisers in the yard, and a lot of yellow crime scene tape. We figured it was just a burglary or something. Ended up that the 2 state police officers were killed by crazy man with gun. Had we not been lost, we would have ended up in the middle of that scene. There is no doubt. He always carries a weapon with him and probably would have engaged a shooter. Long story short, this was a very sad day, but we were thankful we did not see the incident go down. This isn't a near-death experience or anything, but it does periodically cross my mind. My freshman year of college, I dated this guy who turned out to be an abuser and a rapist. Not to mention was also just your average, everyday misogynistic asshole. And dumb, to boot. The relationship was short-lived. I got out and after some stalking incidents, was able to disappear enough that he couldn't track me down anymore. Several years ago, one of my friends was buying a house and I went with him and his realtor one day. The realtor turned out to be my ex's brother's ex-wife, who had been his sister-in-law at the time we were together. She had plenty of shit to talk about the family and my ex. I learned he really went off the deep end after we broke up. Stole and wrecked his next girlfriend's car. Did some time. Knocked up the next one and stalked the shit out of her when she tried to get an expart against his sorry ass. Did some more time. Probably. Got fired from several jobs for shit like stealing. What a pathetic asshole. Anyway. I learned my lesson and I was luckier than some. But sometimes I think that could have been me. Although I also sometimes think it wouldn't have been. It could have been me if I'd stayed. But I didn't stay and that makes me different than the others. I'm not really a very good victim. Guys like that try to choose people they can manipulate. I've always been on the defiant side. That's why he couldn't keep me around. He said, "I'll kill myself if you leave me." I told him I was happy to do the world a favor. I was deployed to the Green Zone in Iraq back in 2004 to 2005. Our chow hall was in one of Saddam's old palaces. I believe it was the presidential palace. They had these enormous doors. A few of my co-workers had discovered a contracting office in the building that had telephones that didn't require calling cards and let us call the states for free. One evening we are eating dinner and plan on using the phones to call home. I decide that we should get ice cream before we go to the contracting office. As we eat, it sounds like a door slams shut in the distance. I remember saying, "Wow. Somebody's mad." We finish eating and walk towards the office when man stops us and said we can't go in there. A rocket had came in but did not detonate. It ripped through a man in the contracting office as he was talking to his family. I will never turn down ice cream. It was Easter 2007 in a southern town in Iraq. My team was hanging out in a staging area on a medium-sized base after lunch waiting to depart for another mission that day. I was the gunner of our vehicle and was sitting in the shotgun seat reading a Time magazine. I was half asleep, tired, when the driver of our Humvee opened my door and let me know that we were about to depart. It took me a few seconds to wake up and get my stuff together. I was moving to exit the vehicle and get my stuff together when we suddenly received incoming rocket fire. The driver was at the front of the vehicle getting ready and was hit directly and killed instantly. It looked like he had open heart surgery. 5-10 seconds later I would have been in that exact spot. That is one of several experiences that year where I didn't die, or get seriously injured, by seconds or inches. A few years ago I was with my close group of friends playing the DD on a night out. We ended up getting in a fight over them just ruthlessly razzing me about something or another. Because of my anger over the incident, I decided to go spend the night with a girl I had started dating instead of following through with the plans I had made with my friends from the night before. Turns out, they got pulled over by the police and one ended up starting a gunfight with the officer over being maced. Long story short, 2 of the 3 ended up in jail and the 3rd ended up dead. I woke up to a phone call from the dead friend's brother and news stories about the incident. It could have, would have, and should have been me in the car with them. I still feel guilty to this day, because the last time I talked to my best friends was in anger. Certainly the hardest event in my life. And the families of all involved. Not to mention the 2 who ended up in jail. My first job was as a host at IHOP. Was a part-time job and I usually worked Saturday and Sunday mornings. One Sunday I was asked if I could stick around and work that night because someone was sick. The IHOP I worked in was always super slow at night. Very few customers. So I just spent my time sitting around by the cash register at the front. Around 8:00 p.m. I'm sitting at the register and a guy comes walking towards the front doors, glass doors. I could see into the parking lot. He is a white guy wearing a hat pulled down and a long trench coat. Very odd for a SoCal summer. Just as he's about to open the door, a customer, one of maybe 3 in the whole place, comes up to pay. Trench coat guy and I lock eyes and he turns and walks away. Obviously a weird moment. But I'm 16 years old and I brush it off. Next morning, all over the news is a robbery and murder that happened a block away from my IHOP by a white guy. baseball cap and trench coat. My father had me call and talk to the cops. Not sure if the guy was ever caught. When I was younger, my dad and I were driving along on the highway. When we were crossing an intersection, someone decided to run a stop sign and go right in front of us. We had no time to stop because we were only about 20 or so feet away from the intersection. Not even a minute before the crash, I was sitting in the passenger's seat without my seatbelt. My dad saw this and told me to put it on. If I hadn't put the seatbelt on, I probably would have flown through the window and quite possibly have died. But since I put the seatbelt on, I got away with some minor whiplash from the seatbelt. I could have been a part of those statistics about people dying in car accidents because of not wearing a seatbelt. That could have been me. College student here. Mine came a few weeks ago. I have a class that ends at 11:45 am in the liberal arts building. I have another class that begins at 12:30 in the adjacent building. So I head to the basement of the liberal arts building and put my phone into airplane mode. No service down there, while I sit there and do some work till my next class. I decide to get gum before Spanish at 12:30 because I don't want my breath to smell bad working with partners. At noon, I walk back to my apartment and forget to change my phone out of airplane mode. As I walk back to the apartment, a cop car whizzes by me. Nothing I haven't seen before. A minute later, right before I step into my apartment, the tornado sirens start going off. In January, I check the time and infer that they are malfunctioning, as it's 12:13 and they tested us at 11:00. My roommates tell me there was a shooting in the EE building, and it doesn't sink in. I was just walking outside and saw nothing wrong. So I turn around and head back out the door to Spanish. Pretty stupid, I know. If there is ever a shooting near you, don't go outside. The shooter only targeted one victim and gave himself up right away to police. He did this right about the time I started going back to my apartment. So I was out walking during his attack. Had it been a Columbine open fire, I would have been in a huge open area to get gunned down. Twice. I was getting off a bridge in Pittsburgh and had two lanes to choose from. The left lane had a car in it. The right lane had none. A traffic light was red, so I had to choose what lane to be in. I normally would have chosen the right lane so I could hurry up at the green light and get around the guy. I was feeling like a nice guy that day and decided to just take my time, so I stayed in the left lane behind the other car. During that red light, a car came in that right lane at over 80 miles per hour and ended up crashing, killing the man in the car. I saw the car go up in a cloud of smoke. If I would have been in the other lane, I would be seriously injured, in a coma, dead. But I choose the left lane, so I'm alive to share this today. Close bracket. My sister is a manic depressive alcoholic. She is overweight, has 2 kids with 2 different men, and does nothing with her life but live off other people's money. But still, I love her. She is a sweet person, but I don't want to emulate her. It's sad because when I think about how she used to be when we were children, I know all that she could have been. She was the most popular girl in school and could have any guy she wanted. Now I only see her for what she has become. She got to this point because of her manic depression mixed with heavy drug and alcohol abuse. We have the same mother and father, and in my mind I struggle with these same manic feelings every day. Most days are good. Some days are bad. But I have a wife and friends who love me and keep me grounded. I have a good job, go to school, and try to improve myself every day. I've managed to channel my manic depressive light version into making myself a productive member of society. I know that part of what gives me my creative edge is that little bit of crazy inside of me. But that edge cuts both ways. And that's what worries me. When I look at my sister, I realize I could have turned out to be her if I wasn't careful. And I still could if I don't keep control of myself. I'm lucky to have the life I do. And almost all of that credit goes to my wife for keeping me sane. She's always grounded. But I still walk the razor's edge. And worry I might end up like my sister if the bad angels of my nature defeat the better ones. I was a service representative for the Social Security admin in the Murrah building. OKC. I worked the front reception window. Probably 50 yards from where Tim McVeigh parked the Ryder truck. Worked there 10 years approximately. About 3 years before the bombing my husband got cancer and died. I was offered a job in another town. 100 miles away. Took it even though I really didn't want to move. Lost lots of friends. Several friends have really suffered from it but didn't die. I always feel like my husband died so I didn't have to. I know it makes no sense. We had a young son till the time. He is grown now, so happy I got to see him grow up. He is my pride and joy. When I was 7 years old, a man attempted to kidnap me outside of my school. It was me and Amp. One other little boy standing there after everyone left. He told me my mother wasn't going to be able to get me and Amp. Sent him instead. He leaned over from the driver's seat and opened the passenger door trying to grab me. He also called out several girls' names trying to guess mine. The boy motioned for me to go with him. I took a step back to think first. I did remember my teacher saying a few weeks before a man like this tried to kidnap a little boy who he told he had forgotten his lunch. The boy jumped out of the car as it drove away. My mom pulled up behind him as I was trying to figure what to do at that young age. He drove crazy fast out of there. As an adult I realized I most likely would have had a very violent and sad outcome. When I watch missing kids reports I think that could have been me. Back in 2012 I was leaving a gas station on my way to school and let a truck go ahead of me. He was in front of me at a stoplight, and when it was our turn to cross the intersection, an SUV ran the red light going about 45. The truck was totaled and the guy was knocked out and bleeding from his head. I drive a small car and it scared me to think that if he had it that bad, I could have been a million times worse. He's actually still fighting the fucker that ran the light because he swears he didn't run the light. But I testified for the driver of the truck and it looks like they are just now settling the lawsuit.